I'm going to go ahead and build a fire, and I've got a couple of things to show as I'm building this fire. We're got to get a fire going because we're going to cook a brisket in the Dutch oven here in a little bit. There's a windstorm outside, and it's kind of windy, almost too windy to do any work, so I'm just going to build us a fire so we can kind of see if the wind will die down a little bit, and maybe we can get out there and do some work later. But right now it's just too windy to be out there and try to do anything, and I'll show you what the windstorm's like here later on. This little piece of wood right here is what's called acote. It's another word for it is called fat wood, and it's highly saturated with the resin that is almost like turpentine, so it's highly flammable. And maybe later on I'll go outside and I'll show you where to find it, how to find it. But just to show you how flammable this stuff is, I'll use a match to ignite it, and when it gets going, and I can use, minimal. If I shave this up into little pieces, it'll just burn. I mean, it's like a piece of saturated wood with turpentine, so it burns pretty good. And I just set that into my kindling there. Oh, I just put it out. Get it going back again. And it'll get the fire going. It'll get a fire going that I need pretty quick. I don't have to wait a whole lot to get the fire going. So I can go ahead and close that, but getting a fire going for a brisket that we're going to throw in a Dutch oven here. So once I get this fire going, we'll be back. So as you can see, that acote is in there, and it's just it burns hot and it burns fast. But I've got to shut this door so that it can ignite the rest of the kindling that I have in there. And once I do that, that air will shoot in through this plate underneath that door and out the stovepipe, and it'll really get going here in a second. I'll be able to throw some bigger chunks of wood on there to get that fire roaring. Alright, so that fire's starting to get going there. I'll give it about another 15-30 seconds to get going, and then I'll start throwing some bigger timber on there and get it going a little bit hotter, and then increase the size of the logs from there, and get the top up here nice and hot so that we can put the Dutch oven up there and put a brisket in there. She's going now. So we'll go ahead and start building it up a little more. Putting some bigger pieces on there. That'll be good, and we'll go ahead, shut that door, let that air force itself in. And we'll get a good roar going there. Usually it takes me anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes to get a good roaring fire going. Sometimes it can be a little stubborn, depending on airflow, amount of oxygen in the room. But if I open up a door or a window, I can get this fire going quick. So she started to flame up there. And fire is one of my pastimes. I love playing with fire. I never, except for when I was a kid, I did burn part of a park down, but that was an accident. They should use railroad ties to build a children's play park anyway, so that was their fault. I can't remember what the name of the oil is that they put in railroad ties, but that stuff catches on.
Creosote.
Creosote. Yeah, that's catches on fire quick. So I was probably about 11 or 12 when that happened. But let's see how we're doing. All right, we'll go a little bigger. And just keep building from here. I'd say probably in about 5 minutes that fire ought to be nice and toasty. It's funny is you got to close the door to get the fire going. So interesting fact, when you hear a fire and you hear the crackle on a fire, when you take a stick, oh, not that stick, that one's too soft, that's well, and you hear the pop, when the fire is actually burning and you hear that snap in the fire, it is the same snap that the piece of wood will make if it were to be snapped in half. So interesting fire fact. Learned that from some older guy back when I was a kid. So interesting information. Alright, my little fire is now a big fire. We're running probably about 3 minutes into it, so I'm going to go ahead and throw a big log on there. That's too little. And I might have to go outside and get a log. Yeah, there's some big logs. On there, get this nice brisket hot. And that is how we build a fire in a wood stove to begin to cook and whatnot. So I'll have some brisket footage for you here in a little bit. Okay, now it's time to get the Dutch oven ready for the brisket. Now this Dutch oven here, I pulled out of a trash pile. It was completely covered in rust, and whoever had it, I guess they thought it was a lost cause, but it took me 2 days to get it back to the condition to where it was usable. But I like taking care of cast iron. Cast iron is a very, very, very efficient way to cook, but you do have to know some things about cast iron, like keeping it seasoned and keeping it cleaning, not using soap or detergents on them, and then seasoning them after every use. But I like to use the cast irons because they dissipate heat so well. I'm glad I pulled this thing out of the trash pile and saved it, because it's about to make me a delicious brisket. So I'm going to go ahead and get the cast iron onto the heat and get it heated up. And I'll throw some ghee in there and use that as a heat transfer so I can sear the brisket, and then we'll add some broth and whatnot in there, seasoning to get it. So we picked up what is it? It's a 3-pound brisket. Yeah, 3 pounds of grass-fed brisket here local. Let's see what she looks like. We'll get her opened up. I don't know what a New Mexico brisket looks like. I know what a Texas brisket looks like. But let's see what we got here. Oh, it's a nice little brisket. They've already trimmed it up pretty good, so it'll be a good little brisket. I'm gonna go ahead and season it up with a little bit of salt and pepper only. I'm not gonna put a bunch of crap on there that doesn't need to be on there. I'll season up both sides. Some nice cracked pepper. Sides. And that's all the seasoning it gets right now. All right. Spoon. So I'm gonna come over here. I'm gonna throw some of Nikki's homemade ghee in here. That'll go right in there. Kind of brush it around in there. Just toss the brisket on there, and I'm going to go ahead and sear it, and listen to that sizzle. Oh yeah. Oh mama. All right, so we'll sear that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and flip that brisket to the other side. That side is seared up. Oh yeah. Alright, we'll sear up the other side, and then we'll start throwing some ingredients in there. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and add the broth and onions and garlic to that bad boy. We'll start off with some of the bone, Mickey's homemade bone broth. I didn't have to use a spoon. Alright, might as well use it all. We'll save what we don't use, or what renders out of there. So, some onion. Oh man, if y'all could smell this right now, y'all be fighting me over it right now. And then a little more salt. Just enough to make everybody happy. And then we'll add some more cracked pepper. And I figure maybe in about 4 to 6 hours, 4 to 5 hours, depending on how the fire fights me on it. The fire, we'll have to keep feeding that fire to make sure that it stays up about 250, 300 degrees. And so maybe 4 hours, maybe 5 hours. We'll see. Well, let's check this brisket out and see how it's going. It's about 4 hours later, and we'll see how she's looking for us. Oh yeah. All the juices have come out. She's beautiful color. Can't wait to get into that. Throw some carrots and potatoes in there and let them cook for about an hour, and we'll have us some cast iron Dutch oven brisket. So let me get some carrots and some potatoes. Some carrots and potatoes in there, and hopefully we'll have some nice, delicious brisket, carrots and potatoes in about an hour or so. See you in about an hour. And the brisket is ready. Scrumptious, delicious meat about to go down. So it's good. It tastes good. It's nice and tender. And we're about to make some plates, and we're gonna have at it. So bon appetit.